Welcome, everyone, once again to the Roundtable, the Editors and Publishers podcast at the American Mind here at the Claremont Institute. I'm your host, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute, and I am joined by a Colossus editor straddling both American Mind and Claremont Review books, Spencer Clavin. His day job at CRB is assistant editor, associate editor, whichever one's higher status.
Narrow world bestriding editor, I think, is the new title.
Yeah. Mike Sabo, managing editor of the American Mind, and back on his regular every other week or so, Matthew Peterson, editor at Blaze and Claremont Institute's Washington Fellow, out and about doing great things. So we wanted to start by talking about eugenics and Sydney Sweeney. Oh no, that's been the hype from the left. Many of you have probably observed this phenomenon. Sydney Sweeney, the new face of American Eagle jeans. They did an ad of her various provocative poses, hawking jeans, and they wanted to do a play on words with jeans, that is good genetic material. It's in a way, actually, I didn't realize until the internet dredged it up that this is basically just a copy of a Calvin Klein ad from 1980 featuring a 15-year-old Brooke Shields who looks 18-ish or so in a sort of, as Spencer pointed out in the feed or the group chat before we went on, is a more articulate ad, a wittier ad, and also more alluring, but basically making the same point. She gives a little mini lecture on evolution, survival of the fittest, hawking Calvin Klein jeans in a somewhat provocative ad. I will say,
and the jeans are better.
The
Importantly,
jeans are better. It's true.
The Sydney Sweeney jeans are like Gen Z bag slop.
Although I will asterisk the elephant in the room as a father and say her father should not let her do that at 15. It's now a piece of pop culture. Here's a collection of the left's reaction to this ad campaign. Vanity Fair, Sydney Sweeney under fire after controversial American Eagle ad campaign. Boston Globe, how American Eagle's Sydney Sweeney good jeans ad went wrong. Euronews.com explained, why is Sydney Sweeney's fashion ad being called Nazi? Slate, Sydney Sweeney has caused an uproar. It was always going to come to this. NBC, American Eagle sparks backlash for touting Sydney Sweeney's great jeans. Newsweek, finally, Sydney Sweeney fronts ad campaign for jeans, sparks debate about eugenics. We can log this in the category of why we can't have nice things. The left's reaction, I guess, long in coming, because you all probably remember it was maybe 2-3 years ago, maybe not that long ago. There was this meme campaign that bubbled up from the internet about, we're so back because advertisements are now celebrating beautiful, voluptuous blonde women, especially Sydney Sweeney. And American Eagle wanted to do this play on words between jeans and jeans. And how much of the country really saw that and thought, well, that's white supremacist. I can't buy those jeans. I think it's the editorial staffs of like 5 publications. So if it's over 500 people, I'd be shocked. And then there's the follow-on freak out from everyone who makes somewhat of a living or bolsters their reputation online by being outraged by something that should have just been a jeans ad with a play on words. I wanted to pair it with this article that Mike Sabo sent our way. Mike, can you give a little rundown of it? It basically, the headline version of it was that modern American women are doing so much work now. With the decline of social life for men, they're now having to take much more emotional care of their boyfriends and husbands. And it's another entry in the tradition now of lamenting the rising, nearly infinite work of modern women, that despite the supposed ascent of feminism, it's sort of whiny in that way. What else should we take away from that?
Yeah, so this piece, Why Women Are Weary of the Emotional Labor of, quote, Mankeeping. So this was in the New York Times. The kind of subhead is, as male social circles shrink, female partners say they have to meet more social and emotional needs. So I'll just read just part of this, just so like, what is mankeeping? What is this new word? The term, coined by Angelica Puzio Ferrara, postdoctoral fellow at Stanford, of course, has taken off online. It describes the work women do to meet the social and emotional needs of the men in their lives, from supporting their partners through daily challenges and inner turmoil to encouraging them to meet up with their friends. What I've been seeing in my research is how women have been asked or expected to take on more work to be a central, if not the central, piece of a man's social support system. Dr. Ferrara said, taking care to note the dynamic isn't experienced by all couples. So basically what this is like, okay, as male institutions, male-only clubs, etc. Heather McDonald's talked about this a lot, have been destroyed. It's like, okay, this is what you're going to turn into. The wife is basically going to turn into like a de facto therapist. Men don't have friends more and more and more. I think this piece cites that in just kind of Chilling Detail, honestly, where men are just alone. Maybe had 5 close friends 20, 15 years ago, and they haven't kept up with them for whatever reasons, for I think pretty large sociological reasons. And so this is kind of what's happened. And now women are reaping the whirlwind, essentially, of something that I think, a lot of feminists were up in arms over. I mean, you look at Augusta Golf Club in Georgia, you look at elsewhere, tearing down the patriarchy. Okay, this is what happens. Your husband is now on the couch and you have to listen to him 24/7. So it's just kind of, chickens kind of coming home to roost at the end of the day. It's like, this is the end result. This is the telos of what you've, started up 30, 40 years ago. This is what's going to happen. It's, your husband is no longer going to be a husband. He's going to be a patient. So why anybody's totally shocked by this, I'm not quite sure, but, they are in any event, and they're kind of trying to figure out what to do with the mess that they've created.
We will cure cancer before we cure the women who write for the New York Times of main character syndrome. It will be easier for us to eradicate contagious disease from the earth than it will be to convince the people that write these sorts of pieces that not everything is about them. How it should be the case that the obliteration of men's social life is somehow a feminist problem, a women's problem, is kind of so on the nose that you have to just let it pass, because this is the very same issue that shuts down men's clubs, that attacks men's only spaces, that derides men for hanging out together and wanting separate spaces, is the exact same pathology that's going to lead people to turn this into somehow an obligation that poor women have to experience. But this all seems like, an after effect of nature healing. Like, the culture has moved so utterly past these sorts of complaints and these sorts of critiques. Like, the moment when it was mainstream and cool and common to turn everything into a social justice issue for one of a number of so-called marginalized groups is so over. And the kind of respect and obeisance that people used to pay to that idea has evaporated so quickly that now, the people who get paid to write these sorts of pieces just have to desperately clutch at any sort of outrage they can manufacture. And I wonder whether the right isn't taking the bait a little bit by responding in defense of, yes, in fact, Sydney Sweeney is our white queen, and we must secure a future for ourselves and our white children. It seems like the good guys kind of have the upper hand here, not the good guys that want to secure a future for ourselves and our white children, but the good guys who just don't care about any of this mishigas. And I feel like the more conservatives can simply project confidence that nobody in his right mind cares about Sydney Sweeney in jeans talking about her jeans, and in fact everyone finds it charming and appealing, and these guys are 5 marginal weirdos who happen to write for the New York Times. I think that's kind of the right approach to take here.
So you're saying we just need to mock and move on.
Can you read the definition again?
Yep. Mankeeping, it describes the work women do to meet the social and emotional needs of the men in their lives, from supporting their partners through daily challenges and inner turmoil to encouraging them to meet up with their friends.
So that last part, sounds to me like the definition of what you would kind of expect friends to do. Any good person
Mm-hmm.
you have a relationship with. The amusing thing to me about this is we already know about emotional labor. We've heard about that for a long time. I've never heard anyone talk about the emotional labor of men keeping up with the emotions of women. But the emotional labor of having to deal with man. And, I get that. I don't like the term, but, there's both sides of the coin. Men and women have the complaints. But this is the definition here is kind of troubling to me because it's helping someone.
Or being married. Yeah.
It's if you have a partner, never mind a partner for life, you kind of expect them to help you with inner turmoil and stuff. And that could be taken to an extreme, obviously. And that could be a dysfunctional relationship or not. But reading it and just hearing it is I'm sorry. This is what human relationships are like. It's called being human. It can go in different directions. And, why can't we just be normal? Once again, shouting into the void, there's me. And then with the Sydney Sweeney thing, it's the same thing. It's right, something that's normal for advertising. It's actually fairly tame compared to the ads of the past, as Ryan points out. And it's actually like she's more of an every girl. I mean, even though she's not, I don't think she's mid. She has a look about her that's kind of like appealing. I think makes her a great spokeswoman, where she's not like a supermodel, and so sort of a tame ad. And then we hear it's Nazism. So I think they're losing the plot and they're losing the people. And the best thing about the ad, anyway, there's the thing about mankeeping. Mankeeping is kept down online. Like the first time we've all heard of it is from this article from some PhD. So I don't buy it's catching on. I get that they're having a temper tantrum about this in the ad, but I just see this as all like them losing their grip, and people aren't buying it. I assume that the jeans are going to do fantastic, right? It's genius marketing, and everyone should be making ads like that just skirt the line a little bit by going back to the 1980s when apparently all of TV was Nazi television.
I just can't. I keep coming back to the line in The Producers where they've gone through this whole process to put on the worst play on Broadway, and it's springtime for Hitler, and the guy playing Hitler is this flamboyantly gay theater director, and the song is called Heil Myself, and the chorus is Heil Myself, raise your beer, every hotsy totsy Nazi stand and cheer. It's like, this is the level of absurdity is that we've reached, is like Sydney Sweeney, hot Nazi selling jeans.
Yeah, and it's I think paired nicely with Washington Post update from yesterday, which was have Republicans won young men, pointing out that the sort of 18 to 25 group, especially among men, are the least likely to back Democrats at 34%. You would think that the collected powers that be in the elite political and media space on the left would regard this as somewhat alarming and a trend to be reversed rather than a fire to fan the flames of. Calling a woman who's backing a jeans campaign who's probably erotically attractive to them and they would like to be friends with her a Nazi for doing a jeans ad is probably not the way to win them back. I mean, call me crazy.
Well, this part of it is really compelling. It's sort of interesting. Like, young men moving right is sort of like the COVID reaction turning out to have been bad, or mass immigration turning out to have not been so popular. It's something that has now become impossible to ignore. But it's also kind of impossible given the position that the American left has staked out. It's kind of impossible for them to reckon seriously with it. And this same thing happened after 2016 when Trump won. There was this mass sort of realization on the part of op-ed writers that kind of middle America had maybe been a bit neglected. And we need to go out like anthropologists and parachute into these strange tribal enclaves called like Appalachia and like the Ozarks. Like, what is this? And you got these weird field reports coming back for about 5 minutes until it became clear that the only explanation that has been allowed for so long of any of these phenomena is straight white men are bad. And so you can look at women having opinions that you don't like, or suffering in ways that you don't like, and you can say, oh, this is the fault of society if you're a leftist. But you can't look at men doing things wrong or having problems and say anything except this is men's fault and have it be acceptable. And so now you get all these pieces. I mean, the one that you cite, Mike, is actually, I think, kind of part of a series, in the same way that the New York Times has been doing a series on COVID where they quietly admit that all of the policies they shilled for were disastrous, especially for children. They've been doing a series where they quietly admit that all the things they've been saying about men have been hideously destructive for both sexes. But they're all about, like, why are men being seduced away by this kind of hyper masculinist, evil Nazi cult leader, Trump? Like, what can we do to bring them back? And there's no room in that space among those people having that conversation. There's no room to sort of seriously and openly entertain the possibility that we got something fundamentally wrong about this analysis, about the evils of masculinity, about the hatefulness of Trump. And so this is the bind. Like, we talked a while back about Zoran Mandani. I think this is the bind that guys like Mamdani are there to get them out of. Is like their only route toward kind of returning to something more like stable and sensical is to put forward like basically a socialist revolution with a vaguely non-white like but sort of masculine dude at the head of it or something. Like there's really like there are very few options, very few routes out of this conundrum for them.
No, and remember, you're right to recall 2016, they at least tried for a hot second to go out and do the reports. And they also hired a bunch of people. I was talking to Chris Bedford at the Blaze about this, another Lincoln fellow from Claremont, who's in charge of politics editor and DC guy for us. And his wife, similar to our friend and colleague Michael Anton, she was hired for a hot second by, Big Lib publication. And just like they had Anton write 2 op-eds, and then the second one was on birthright citizenship, and they just ghosted him. And same thing, with Sarah Bedford. They hired these people on. They were like, "Oh, wait a minute, we actually don't want to hear any of this. Our audience doesn't want to hear any of this." And so now that's not even an option. Like they're not even going to go explore. It's all just these complaints. And so, I kind of feel like, dare I say it? I mean, if a woman complains in the woods, does anyone hear her? Maybe the solution is, we just tune out these women complaining, as men have done since time immemorial. And, that's what, when I read this stuff, it's like, I'm not going to read this whole article. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm going to tune out and go back into my own man cave of my mind. And I think that's what a lot of these young men are doing. And when you see, my son is 15, I'm floored by the opinions of him and his colleagues, his little compadres, that they sort of come to on their own. And they're not like, it's not like, screw the feminists or whatever. It's just kind of naturally, organically conclusions they arrive at by looking at the world. And the same with the young women. There's less of them, but my daughter is one of them. I mean, the stuff that comes out of their mouths is just kind of like reacting to the world and environment they grew up in a lot of times, and not even my tutelage, such as it is. And it's amazing, the kind of things they say. And it's fresh and it's interesting because it's natural, So an example would be, if you guys seen the Kevin Lang, he's a comedian. He's a Black comedian guy on YouTube, and he's got this panel of bros. They're just guys on the show, and they have a panel. And the theme of the little talk show, which is hilarious and has millions of views, they do stuff like a bunch of these people get in front of them and they say there's 5 different guys and 5 different numbers. Pick which guy has the number in his bank account right now. And they'll also do things like 5 guys in a green suit and one of them is white, and they have to figure out which one is white or which one is Mexican, And so they say all kinds of like politically incorrect things. And it's just, dudes on the show. And it's the kind of stuff your son will pick up and just start watching with his friends and thinks it's hilarious. And that's just kind of, I don't know how political that guy is, but it's just kind of organically happening. And I don't know. I don't want to get too hopeful or too white-pilled, but I feel like that's the future.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to kind of point that out, where I think so many times, and Spencer, you wrote about this last year with your right-wing culture, that the left has obviously dominated culture for a long time, for years, for decades. They're at the commanding heights, use whatever, idioms you want borrowed from Marxism, which I think are actually very true. I don't just say that just to kind of point that out, but I think that's very true. Where the right-wing response just itself turns into just a mirror image of the ideology that they're responding to. So I think that is key to break out of this, like almost kind of trad stuff and some of the stuff you see online where it's like, okay, well, if you don't like 1950s housewives, I'm going to show you 10,000 pictures of 1950s housewives and have my vacuum and, be doing this and doing that. And it's like, no, how about you live real life? How about you live according to nature? How about you actually break out of that altogether? I think that is the absolute key. That's something the right needs to learn, very much so, with doing things well, living life to the fullest, doing what needs to be done for your family, for your kids, especially just with the kind of stuff that, they could be immersed in, but hopefully are not. I think if you parent the right way, you don't have them looking at phones 24/7. So I think all that is kind of points to this. We're just absolutely key. I mean, you need to get them back to some semblance of reality. And it's just so important just to come out, a self-governing citizen, but, somebody who can actually, function and has a personality.
Yeah. Last week we talked about Colbert. They canceled The Late Show, not just with Colbert, but full stop. And they're canceling a bunch of these late night slots. And the people defending Colbert were protesting, oh, he's the best rated late night show, essentially. He's the best rated show in this slot. And they're comparing, like, within this little hermetically sealed world that used to be the world, that used to be the culture. It was like what was on TV from 11:30 until 12:30 a.m. or whatever. That was what the culture was for that hour. And Colbert and his handlers and his lovers and fans are kind of still living in that world and refusing to concede that beyond the gates, right, there's this huge barbarian horde of TikTokers and Instagram reel posters, some of whom are making jokes that are very much of the kind that Matt is describing. They're not cruel, they're not like actually racist, but they're observational. There's a guy, a Chinese guy I follow on Instagram who just does like imitations of different Asian families giving their babies names. So he'll do like the Japanese names and do the Chinese names, and then you get to the Chinese parents, and they just like throw a metal pot down the stairs, and it goes clong clang clang clong, and it's like that's sort of, or he'll do like if Adam and Eve were Asian, and God says don't eat the apple, and they're like, okay. And then they start eating like the bats in Eden, and the angels are like, what the hell is going on? But it's like, these are funny jokes. And this is the sort of thing that if you live in the world defined by the Colbert people of the entertainment industry, like you would never even enter your head if you're operating in that space. And so in much the same way, right, like these Sydney Sweeney ads are coming now out of a new, fresh source of just sort of natural, normal life. It's not right wing at all. It's not any wing. It's just like, this is just kind of surprise, surprise. Like people see a hot girl wearing jeans. They want to buy the jeans. They want to talk about the hot girl wearing the jeans. And like this whole New York Times reaction is basically the Colbert equivalent. It's like, but we created a whole world where this is like outlawed, and we would never even you never even think to make a joke about jeans, and like that world is just like has evaporated. But there's like 5 people still acting like we live in.
Yeah, just a brief example from the Kevin Lang show episode I saw with my son. He's watching, and so they're trying to figure out which person in the green suit is Mexican. And it goes to the first guy, and he's kind of tall and lanky, and he starts talking as if he has a Mexican accent. And immediately, like the 3 black guys in the panel are like, "That brother is African. Like you were African. You were bad at this. You can't even pretend." Then goes to the Hispanic guy in the panel. He's like, "I'm not even talking to you." Look at him. They just go.
Classic example. Yeah.
Yes,
that is exactly the sort of thing that we've been trained to cringe at without ever asking what exactly is hurtful or bad about it, right? It's like you say that and everyone's like, oh, that's a little edgy. It's like, why is that even edgy? This is just like the fact that black guys can recognize, like they're, and so that like the erasure of that is kind of what's going on.
I wanted to, just the last thing about the Sydney Sweeney stuff, is sort of right up our alley in a way. Somebody on, I forget who, on Twitter, decent sized account, said these journalists are clearly just, this is the state of journalism, right? They just looked at a freak out on TikTok and they decided to write it up as if it were news. And my commentary on that on X was that this is incorrect, or it's the improper way of thinking about it, because we need to understand the role of academia and expert opinion in all of this. And TikTok is actually downstream from all of that, even if most of them don't even know it. And so, and it segues nicely with Mike's highlighting of this piece about Mankeeping. Again, another female academic writing this up. I think we do ourselves no favors by misunderstanding the causal line that goes from one thing to the next. And the freak out over Sydney Sweeney's incipient white supremacy because of her participation in an American Eagle ad, just saying that is so absurd, just on the mechanics of it, but leave that aside, misses the fact that our pop culture now, even on TikTok, is diffusely still being pushed and run the same way a lot of our elite culture, media or otherwise, has been run for so long, which is that ideas that were avant-garde in the 60s in academia and then laughed at when they bubbled up in political correctness in the 90s. And then people took some alarm at them when they spread into the public square after 2020 and the summer of George Floyd. They've been running the show all along, in a way. not running the show, but sort of setting the narrative. So really, we just come back to the sad state of affairs of modern mainstream journalism. It is still a bunch of mostly kids who don't know anything, parroting the latest fads of academia as they've been diffused through the rest of our cultural media space.
Well, the good news is that they're really going out of business for real now. I mean, what's her name on MSNBC? Maddow taking a $5 million pay cut, cuts all over the place. Washington Post, Kessler, the other Kessler, been there 30 years. Like they're all taking buyouts. I mean, that's the only good news, I guess.
Yeah, screeching and hectoring at your audience turns out leads to a diminishing audience.
Yeah.
And the Colbert backers are wrong, of course. The highest rated late night show is Red Eye on Fox with Greg Gutfeld.
Is that in the same time slot? Is 11:30?
Well, I mean, it's late. Maybe it's at midnight, so it's not the same.
Well, that's the whole trick, right? Is like in much the same way as they've ideologically defined themselves into this tiny box. They also just like the whole point. I mean, they do this with academic positions too. They'll say like, no serious academic thinker now doubts that Marx was a powerful theorist. You know, I read books all the time that say things like this, and you're like, yeah, because you've defined serious academic thinkers as only those who begin from the premise that Marx is, so there's no Victor Davis Hanson in this book. There's no, you're really just describing like what the realm of legitimacy is. And I'm sure they do this with the New York Times bestseller list, right? They define like what sales count in such a way as to ensure that conservative books don't get on it, which is not just sour grapes about conservative books. It's like, this is a thing that they actually do. And that like officialdom, that gatekeeping is kind of the thing that's breaking down in all of these settings. Right. It doesn't, you can say like, well, Colbert is the highest rated 12:35 to 1:02 p.m. host with a like mustache or something. And it's like, okay, great. That's fine. I'm going to go watch more TikTok.
Right. The highest rated show with what's his audience? 2.5 million people. Johnny Carson, I know it's apples and oranges in a way. I mean, so many fewer channels, but I mean, he regularly got, I think, 10 to 20 million people a night. I mean, when he signed off, I think 50 million people were watching his show in 1992. So, I mean, this is just a huge shift. These people have become so tiny, and yet the only reason why anybody even knows about them is the media megaphone. That's it. I mean, if we just kind of let them, survive on their own, they're not going to. And I think just the evidence of this whole thing, it's just like the kind of, I guess, in a way, boomer world is just breaking apart. And I think it needs to happen. I mean, we're looking at a time where, CNN may not be around in 5 years, and praise God, thanks that that's happening. This is all very much needed and very good. And this is just, hopefully the earliest signs and some signs of that eventually happening.
Yeah, they tie themselves to this narrative. I think Russian collusion is actually still at the basis of this, where that's why that flares up again. You can see them just tying them. They're like, will they commit suicide or not? And the answer is suicide for all of them. Great, do that. And to the gatekeeping point, elsewhere, people were talking about the 100 best podcasts in America. You see this list came out?
Yep.
Best 100 podcasts in America. And just to give you an indication of how BS this was and how it was mocked, they didn't mention Joe Rogan. I mean,
it says it all.
Just ridiculous. Like, no one's going to take it seriously.
No.
I'm looking at it now. Two Dope Queens, unfiltered conversation from WNYC studio. Who has not, who among us has not spent hours binging Two Dope Queens?
WNYC. Yeah. Yeah. The audience of normal late night are watching reruns of Gunsmoke or watching on Twitch people play video games. Yeah, it should warm your heart because, Johnny Carson was interesting and funny, let alone the changed media landscape. Had interesting guests on, was a funny guy. But Colbert and all the rest of them have just been lecturing everybody for 3 years. So good riddance. Speaking of the experts crashing on the shoals of reality, we have GDP numbers out for the latest quarter. GDP grew at a nice, healthy 3%, defying all of the doom and gloom predictions about Trump's tariff regime, which sort of piggybacks on the first quarter results, which were a decent clip, small percentage better than everyone had predicted, given the launching of the trade war. Meanwhile, Trump has just struck a pretty good deal, which even I think the Financial Times admitted that Trump won, basically, against the EU in this EU trade deal. And Now, we should say, of course, that the real tariff cliff is still not upon us. It's coming in August, so we'll see how things shake out when the deadline actually crashes. But, the bien pensant crowd of economists and experts predicted basically depression by now. And we are far exceeding, to say the least, anything like a depression. It's sort of, I was saying before we hit record, Trump's like the world historical example of the C student running everyone else's lives, getting the prettiest girlfriend, and just running from win to win in the face of all the nerds predicting that his life choices were bad and that he would never amount to anything. And I think that's a good thing.
I mean, I just, this is one of the greatest moments, like Monday of this week, when this news came out, because I was sitting there on our show at Blaze and just looking at the bullet points they had for me. And the producers put in, bullet point 1, EU is going to spend $700 million buying energy from us. Bullet point 2, $650 million in investments, or whatever it was. Bullet point 3, they're going to buy unspecified amount of military equipment. Bullet point 4 and 5, like more stuff they're going to do. And then the last bullet point was, in return, the U.S. is going to impose a 15% tariff on European goods. Just like out of thin air, and just reading it made me think of, all the real kind of worries that people on the right had, and, tariffs are bad and all this kind of thing. And just thinking like, damn it, the guy was right. Like, he was right all along. He's been saying this for 30, 40 years, and he just friggin' did it, and it just works. And you have to sit there and go, there's God loves, fools, drunkards, the United States of America, and Donald J. Trump. And, there he is succeeding. And I mean, it's just one of those moments where he just wins, and you gotta hand it to him.
I think all the things that you were just talking about, the commitments, I think just with the European Union and Japan alone, that's 1.15 trillion. That is astounding. And then you look at the other deals kind of in process or completed: UK, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. No agreement's been reached with China yet, so we'll see what happens there. But I mean, and then you look at the GDP growth. I mean, how does this, comport to not only what, people on the left are saying, but what I saw economist after economist on the supposed right saying over and over again. And it's like, okay, I mean, what is actually happening is the absolute opposite of what you said was going to happen. I mean, it was going to be, from what you said, like Leslie Nielsen, Naked Gun, we're nothing to see here, and there's all these fireworks and people on fire going off in the background. That's not happening at all. I mean, we just had 3% GDP growth. So it's just amazing once again. I mean, just how bad the experts are off. Trump is winning, at least in reality. I mean, like Ryan said, we'll see when some of this stuff actually hits and what happens. I mean, I think prices on appliances and that are probably going to be going up. We'll probably have some negative consequences, but this was always going to be a trade-off anyway. I mean, this was never promised as, oh, you get everything, the US gets everything, and that's it. There's going to be no negative consequences. Of course there are. But this just shows again the tyranny of the experts and just how wrong they are constantly. It's like, why would you believe the same guy who's been wrong about everything since 2016, but in this case, he might be right about the tariffs? Wrong again. I mean, it just continues this realignment just in every stage. And it's not only just culturally, politically, on the left or the establishment, but it's with us too. So I think that's really important. Like, who you're going to trust, who are you going to read kind of going forward? Who's been actually right about some of this stuff?
At CRB, we have this quarterly schedule. This is TAM's sister publication. And we always talk about, like, it can be extremely frustrating to watch these dramas unfolding in national politics and try to pinpoint exactly when the issue is going to land and how do we intervene and when or whatever. But one thing we always say is, like, the positive advantage of that is you get to kind of watch and see which things stick and which things land and which things just turn out to be an effect of whatever moment you're in the news cycle. And Americans in general, I think, are very bad, and I count myself among these Americans who are very bad at realizing when a news cycle is just a news cycle. Like, you get immersed in this cloud of rhetoric that makes every event seem like the most important or all defining thing, and it becomes like David after Dentist, that old video of the kid that's been drugged up at the dentist, and he looks around and goes, is this going to be forever? Like, we tend to assume that the state of the media or the state of the narrative is going to be forever the way it is right now. And this tariff thing has really taken that shape because Trump is doing a Trump thing. He's doing this freewheeling, wild negotiation with a North Star in mind. He wants trade protectionism for the US. He believes it's going to help the economy. He has like a theory, a sort of general theory of the case that may or may not pan out. Every little moment, every micro gesture in that negotiation has been treated as if it were going to be like the future of the US economy. And that's where you get these predictions about like, well, like soon, stocks will plummet or prices will skyrocket or whatever. And like none of these things materialize. We seem to be kind of gradually working our way toward a readjustment of the global trade balance. I think there will be pluses and minuses to that. We probably will see prices rise in some areas, but we might also see like industry take off in others. But it's just really remarkable to me to watch the like breathless passion with which every stage in this process has been turned into like an epoch defining moment, where Trump seems to be treating it rather differently. He seems to be kind of moving stage by stage through a negotiation. And right now, it kind of look good for him. We'll see like where it goes next, but this was a good moment for him.
Yeah, and in a healthy academic environment, we should keep an eye on it. For economists and a very dying, if not nearly extinct breed of political economists, you would think they'd re-examine their priors and then start doing work on what neo-Hamiltonian economics means in the 21st century. That is to say, a sort of tariff regime that's focused on supply chains, national sort of independence, especially in, take for one example, rare earth metals, which has scrambled some of the Chinese negotiations. I don't think we've addressed it on this podcast, but you talking to friends in the administration, part of the climb down on China or the sort of cooling of rhetoric had a lot to do with basically they can basically turn off the world's supply of magnets because of rare earth minerals, and we have plenty of them in the United States. We're just not mining them. They're all on the ground, especially in the Mountain West and elsewhere. And you would think that it would be a top priority for the leading experts, especially in national security, to have been beating this drum forever. There's been a small segment of them that have been, but this is just, I think, part of Trump's calculation on all of this, along with, you kind of alluded to it, Spencer, compensating for any price shock effects from tariffs with really freeing up American energy, or the continued pursuit of American energy independence and even surplus. So it'll be a thing to watch, but I guess I wouldn't hold our breath about the state of academia being able to now explain this to us and how they were wrong and why they were wrong and how that's interesting going forward, especially as it would pertain in very critical ways to national policy going forward. That would be a healthy academic environment. Alas, we don't have it yet. We just have pockets of it at places like Claremont, Hillsdale, and Matt's alma mater, Thomas Aquinas College. Although I wouldn't call TAC or even Hillsdale a great production factory of elite academic opinion. They're doing the much more important work of just educating the generation of elites that will replace the Ivy League degrees, we hope, as those degrees increasingly become more and more either laughable, ideologically tendentious, or colonized by AI and increasing numbers of students who aren't able to think or write. Actually, one thought from the Mankeeping section. I mean, we're simple creatures. I think the Mankeeping could be outsourced to an LLM if they get a little bit better. So there's relief on the horizon, ladies. Don't worry. With that, we should get to some cultural recommendations. I have like a two-parter in a way, which dovetails with some of our discussion of men's spaces. So I don't know if it's really a cultural recommendation. I'll just say for the first time, I got the chance to attend the Bohemian Grove for 2 nights for the Midsummer Encampment. And I won't say much about it because it's, they pride their privacy and we should respect that. But I will just say, anyone out there listening, no matter your politics, if you ever get invited, go. It's all the way out on the West Coast. If you're far away, you got to fly to a small airport in Sonoma and rent a car or whatever. But how would I describe this to the outside world? There's all the caricatures on the right that it's some satanic pagan ritual and bad demonic things are happening there. But it's really just a lost island for boys, but for men who are interested in politics, culture, music. So there's 115 camps at the place. There's 1,000 people there at any given time, give or take change, sometimes less, sometimes more. And you just wander around and go to talks, enjoy some evening theater in the somewhat bawdy BAUDY style of all men theater, women in drag, and everyone's having an uproariously hilarious time. And then at the end of the night, you go to sort of later night stuff, which is basically a bunch of concerts happening, small bands playing all over the place, and more talks, and you're just hanging out with your friends and enjoying beverages while you walk around, at least in the central part of the camp, in an old growth redwood forest. So it's a cultural institution that could never be recreated because it's all male membership. Women and families are welcome a few times a year, but not at the midsummer encampment. And it's in one of the most beautiful settings in the world. So anyway, it's my pitch. If you get invited, don't believe the weird conspiracy theories about it. It's much more harmless, and it's just a good time. Then the other thing, we've been in Maine and Cape Cod, a mix of professional and family stuff for a week or so. And I picked up an old Steinbeck book that I had never seen before called The Moon is Down, which is a short book you could read in an afternoon. It's published in 1941, and it's Steinbeck's envisioning of if the fascists had conquered North America. And it's centered in a small coastal town. You're not quite sure where. I think it's got to be on the East Coast, where a mine is very important. And it's sort of the contrast between the psychology and approach to tyrannical rule by the occupiers, and then the slow realization of the ability of the local townspeople with a little bit of outside help to revolt. Nazi is never mentioned. It's sort of just alluded to. Reading it in 41, you of course know what it's all about. And it's a nice little study. It's a bit propagandistic and a bit starry-eyed. It's a nice little piece of cultural literature that's worth reading, and it will throw you back a little bit into the sort of mid-war era in World War II. Anyway, I recommend it. Go check it out. It won't take you long to read. It's beautifully written and has some penetrating psychological analysis about the differences between tyrannies and republics.
So I talked about this last week on the podcast. I started the first episode of the 2-part docuseries on Billy Joel on HBO Max. So my wife and I are now kind of in the middle of the second part, and it's really fascinating. You'll see home movies, especially like when he was married to Christy Brinkley, and just it's fascinating. I mean, it was marred in one point. He repeated the Trump like 2017 Charlottesville lie that the media and Biden and et cetera have tried to do. But outside of that, I mean, that was definitely the one bad thing about this. I mean, it's fantastic. It goes through all his albums, his ups, his downs. A manager who absolutely stole, I mean, I think upwards of almost $90 million, which is insane. He trusted this guy so much. It was the brother of his ex-wife, and just didn't want to face what was actually going on, then did an audit and realized, oh, this guy's like stealing all this money from me. I should have way more. And this was, in the mid 80s. I mean, basically, close to, not probably the height of his peak. That was probably in the, maybe after, Stranger, 52nd Street, maybe in the 70s. But I mean, at a place where he should have had much more money than what he had. I'm to the part now where River Dreams just came out. It's 1993, and he talks about why he's never actually done a full length album since then. So it's really fascinating. Would definitely say, if you're a fan of Billy Joel, if you're a fan of dad rock, like Spencer says, is my musical taste. If you're a fan of yacht rock, anything like that, go for it. And speaking of yacht rock, so I think I mentioned this also last week, the Toto concert is finally here on Sunday. I'm going to see them, Christopher Cross, Men at Work. So I am very much looking forward to that.
I just want to make clear that dad rock is not a pejorative. In fact, if anything, it's a term of praise. But you're really not bucking the reputation by citing your Toto attendance right after your Billy Joel fandom. Both great, terrific artists, by the way, just to be clear. I guess I have two, because one of them is so sort of trifling as not even to count as a cultural recommendation. I have a cocktail that I'd like to recommend to our listeners, because basically all over the country, certainly here in Nashville, the heat has become simply offensive. At this point, I feel that this is like an affront to human dignity, and we ought to speak to somebody about it. But failing that, if we're going to have to suffer through this heat wave, you really want like a good cold cocktail. I love a martini, but you get a little tired eventually of martinis. There's only so many different ways you can make them. So allow me to recommend another gin cocktail called the Too Soon. Have you guys anyone ever had a Too Soon on the podcast? Okay.
No.
Okay. Two big slices of orange in the bottom of the tumbler that you're going to use to mix the cocktail. You can muddle them, which is easy enough, just kind of crush them up a little bit. But the really fancy way is to take one of those giant ice cubes and toss it in there and let the ice cube just basically open up the orange slices as you shake it. Gin, like some sort of nice dry gin. And then the truly secret ingredient is chinar, which is an artichoke flavored, like a bitter kind of liqueur. And I think it's like 1-to-1 with like a little simple syrup, but you can look this up online and mix that all together. Extraordinarily refreshing. And if you're tired of your martinis and your gin and tonics and your Aperol spritzes, but you still want a refreshing cocktail, make it Too Soon. But my real, like, actual, I don't just drink alcohol, I also watch things and think about things recommendation is the adaptation of The Sandman, Neil Gaiman's Sandman on Netflix, which does have a slight political tinge to it because Gaiman was the subject of like a late Me Too. There was a sort of hangover controversy surrounding Gaiman's practices, which did sound abhorrent. I didn't really look into them too closely because at that point I was so disgusted by the whole phenomenon, and I was disgusted by particularly what the Gaiman thing seems to have been is that he was this like self-proclaimed ally, many of whom, of course, turned out to be terribly mistreating young women, all the while they proclaimed their feminist bona fides. And Gaiman is, I should warn our listeners, insufferably sort of woke, pre-woke. Like he just throws, he's known for throwing in gratuitous LGBT characters, etc. But he's also undeniably a kind of offbeat, macabre, zany imagination, and his graphic novels are classics. This is one of his most famous pieces of property. And what's good about the Netflix adaptation is simply that it goes all out. Like it really just throws the melodrama at the wall. It's fully camp, fully overdone. And they canceled it, I suspect, because of the sort of Me Too stuff surrounding Gaiman, but also I think because it's kind of unsophisticated. Like it feels very lowbrow because it's so over the top. But it's absolutely crushing on the Netflix numbers. So it's kind of an interesting thing that, like, despite the cancellation and despite the problems and despite the fact that it's really not a perfect show, it's just so entertaining, and it's got all these weird, like, kind of ancient mythologies jumbled up together and set in the modern world. So if you want a graphic novel adaptation that is not simply the rehash of like the same 5 superheroes you've seen and that doesn't suck, Sandman, which is just coming to its conclusion now on Netflix.
This is amazing. I love this part of the show. First, I mean, I can't wait to see Ryan's inbox after the Claremont Institute defends Bohemian Grove. I know you'll get some choice emails.
I'll tease everyone by saying I spotted one other Claremonster while I was there, older than I was.
Oh. And then, Sabo with the Billy Joel dad rock. I'm guilty as charged. I came a certain age, and it's like I never listened.
Not an accusation. It's a
I know. I'm proud of it. I mean, I listen to Honesty really loud and sing it really loud, and I love those songs. Those songs are great for kids too. It's like Goodbye to Hollywood. I mean, I play that while we were driving around Hollywood with the kids. It's great for that stuff. And as to drinks, I will say that I'm just dependent upon the stable ranch water, which I fell in love with when I came to Texas because I did not know that men could make such things as simple as pouring tequila and, some Topo Chico in a glass. You're like, what? So I'm still not over it. I'm not over the ranch water in the summers here, and we drink it like water. I wanted to point out something just on the Sydney Sweeney thing. You're going to have to forgive me because I only have a few cultural recommendations. Bridget Fedesi tweeted this article out, and there's a line in it about Sweeney. Even her figure, this is a quote, even her figure has become a cultural stand-in for the idea pushed by conservative commentators that Americans should be free to love boobs. I think my ancestors died for that, right?
This The Claremont Institute is devoted to the study of the founding and the writings of the founders. I can guarantee that that's somewhere in the Federalist Papers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
We don't know who exactly wrote it, which of them, but it's in there somewhere. Take our word for it. So recently, I rewatched the Sicario movies with my son, my oldest son. He found them dark because he's still bright and idealistic and full of good cheer and morals. I found them amazing that they were ever made. I know a lot of our audience probably already seen them, but I mean, the fact that they were prescient as hell about everything and just said all the things you would want. And you look at it right now, it's like a fever dream of the right to make those movies, which is why they've become memeable and all that. So the fact that Taylor Sheridan made those movies and a number of other incredible movies before he started making every TV show known to man is notable. And both Sicarios are worth watching again if you're into such things, because it is astounding, all the themes in there. And of course, the central theme of the first Sicario is that even though she's a good, upstanding person, the FBI agent is in over her head in a land of wolves, and that America is in the same place when it comes to the border. I mean, absolutely astounding. Of course, the cinematography in the first one from Dennis is amazing. And then as far as the reading front goes, I'm just going to suggest in general reading poetry again. Anyone out there who's not reading a lot, which is like a lot of us because we're on the screens, just picking up anything, any kind of poem and reading it to yourself before bed is a good idea. Or in the morning, it's going to be short and you have something to reflect on, and sort of like maybe the anecdote to TikTok of the brain. And so, basic suggestion, I know. Or also, I encourage people, baby steps, take some kind of nature writing. If you don't have any, we could recommend some of that later on. But we need just take something where you feel good about resting in, a paragraph or a sonnet. And I feel like that's a good anecdote for the modern mishaps that we're all falling into with the screens.
And a good, I'm sure Spencer will endorse this and maybe has some other recommendations, but if you want a good primer on great English verse, go to the Oxford Book of English Verse. Slightly older edition, I would recommend. You can get them at used bookstores and on the internet pretty easily.
Oh man, you guys are doing me dirty by introducing this topic at the end of the show.
I know.
Just spend the rest segment. But yes, absolutely, Ryan. Also, the Norton anthology is pretty good. Also, the making of a poem, which is about like basic verse forms and in pretty non-technical language, but just so that you can get a foothold in like what's a villanelle, what's a sonnet, how do these things work, is really helpful just for your basic enjoyment. And then also memorize things. Like exactly as you say, Matt, you don't have to read a lot. In fact, you should read a little and dwell in it. And if you memorize it, it'll start to occupy your brain in a way that like really clears out a lot of the other gunk that the internet is constantly sluicing into our minds.
Good. It was a nice pastiche of recommendations. I love it. But we've come to the end of our episode, so thank you all again for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to learn more about our work, go to www.claremont.org. If you want to support our work, just put a /donate in there. We don't sell much at the Claremont Institute besides a few magazines, so we're dependent on all of your support. Thank you very much. Go to AmericanMind.org for the latest from the American Mind, to check out the Center for the American Way of Life's work. I just reviewed this morning with our interim director, Annalisa Rogers. Our executive director, Arthur Millick, is over at the State Department on leave, working for the government. So Annalisa's shouldered the task of Center for the American Way of Life output. We've got a number of provocations coming out on all sorts of spicy topics like women in the military and things like that. So keep an eye out for those at dc.claremont.org. And then, of course, go to the Claremont Review Books at ClaremontReviewBooks.com. Please rate the show, spread the word to your friends and family. We'll again tease that this will be a vidcast, I think, within the month. So that should be fun and an adjustment for us, but new vistas await popularity and reach of the Roundtable podcast. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.